The economic condition of the U.S. pork industry since September of 2007, we had been losing about $23 per head for the last 17 months. Between November 2007 and April of 2008, every pig marketed, our producers were losing about $23 per head. We were well positioned in this spring of 2009 to go into profitability. Boom, the H1N1 tsunami hit. And since since April into October this year, we've lost $5.3 billion. From September 2007 to October 2009, the U.S. pork industry lost $5.3 billion in economic losses. We did not see swine flu come at us, come completely out of the blue. You have a national public health emergency land right in your lap, and all you have to do is time to think and react. As soon as the story started breaking, we started receiving 20, 30, 40, 50 calls, whether it was in our Washington, D.C. office, could have been in our Des Moines office. So there wasn't a set pattern. It's just that 1 minute CNN would call, National Public Radio would call, a CBS anchor would call, so it was just a rapid fire back and forth responding to questions from the news media. The best way to respond is have one point person, and that was the director of our communications. And all the communication requests and all the responses came into that communications director, and it went back out through that communications director. The most difficult question that we faced with news media was to assure them that you could not get the swine flu by eating pork. And all that we had to do was to turn to the scientific facts and transmit that on with confirmation from the Department of Agriculture and a couple of land grants. But that was the most difficult exercise that we went through, with just communicating the facts of H1N1, which kept running into the fears of H1 all through this story. In putting together our key messages, we had to sit down and take a quick, rough view, if you will, of what the messages the news media was reporting. And then once we got that reporting of how they were spinning and reporting the story, we had to sit down and to say, okay, how did we need to correct those stories with the facts? And therefore, that's where we came up with the important messages. Pork was safe to eat. We had to get the pictures of the pigs out of the story. We had to quit them using swine flu, because you don't get the flu by being around pigs. So yes, we sat down, put the war room together, identified the issues, 1, 2, 3, and then put together a clear, concise, and compelling message points that we then went back to the news media and started hammering away at penetrating the news. The biggest experience or lesson that I learned by working with the media was that very difficult to penetrate the news media with the facts versus the fears that the news media tended to be reporting on the swine flu outbreak on April 24th. Beside the news media, the most important partner that we had to deal with was with the federal government. We had to immediately begin working with Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. We had to work with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. We had to work with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Atlanta. Those federal agencies that had agencies of government that would deal directly with this. They were the third-party authorities that the news media would listen to as fact that we used in shaping our messaging. The major challenges to American agriculture and getting our messages out is that I think that we have, the American population is what, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations removed from the farm, 1. 2, I think many people that think that food comes from the grocery store, they have lost an appreciation of rural America and agriculture in this country. Plus, I believe that 24-hour news, point, counterpoint, I think agriculture is getting kind of a black nose, a black eye, if you will, on what we're doing, how we're producing food, the abundance of food production in this country. And again, it's time for, I think, for agriculture to sit back down, reframe itself, and rebrand itself for the American consumer. I believe that if we don't reposition, rebrand, reframe American agriculture, I'm concerned that we're going to see increasing amount of U.S. agriculture production go offshore. That the American consumer, they don't really care where safe, nutritious foods come from. If it comes from Brazil, if it comes from Russia, if it comes from Japan, they don't care, they'll buy it. And I have a real concern that if we don't get a handle and better educate the American people on food production in this country, it will go offshore. America's farmers and ranchers must get more involved in educating their members of Congress and their state legislators on the issues that are impacting their farming operations. Yes, it's going to be a farm bill piece of legislation is going to have an impact, but global climate change legislation is going to have a huge impact. Healthcare reform is going to have a huge impact on providing them and maybe their employees of a small business healthcare benefits here going forward. They have to get acquainted. They need to invite their member of Congress or that member of Congress staffer to come out to their farming operation, bring them to the local coffee shop, get them acquainted with livestock production or grain production in this country, help them understand what it takes to raise a 285-pound pig, what the input costs and all that's associated with raising that pig, getting it to market, getting it shipped, processed, and exported to the global export market. They better pick up the phone, or they better pick up the phone and call Newsweek and talk to the author of that story and give them the other side of that story and basically say to them, shame on you. Did you talk to a pork producer? Did you talk to a corn grower before you went and wrote that story? How come? They need to be responsible. So my takeaway is that I would tell agriculture, livestock producers, grain farmers, they have to get involved in telling their story, and what a better way to do that is getting on talk radio. We've got corn and soybean producers all across this country today in combines, okay, trying to get this crop out of these fields. They ought to be talking on talk radios, talking about the problems they're facing trying to get corn and soybeans out of the field and its impact on corn prices, and it's going to be impacting on their farming operations. I think it's critical that U.S. agriculture has got to go back and reframe ourselves. We need to develop clear, concise, and compelling stories about what we're doing on the farms, on our forest lands in this country, across rural America, and go back and reframe those messages and again communicate the very important work that we do, the service that we provide to the American consumer every day in this country. The way we recover from that is obviously we got to downsize. We got to downsize our production with consumption. We got to get our exports markets open back up. We had, as soon as H1N1 hit, lost 27 countries. The bulk of them are all now back open. China opened last week. Russia is going to be opening their markets. So we got to get those export markets open back up. I think as the economic climate, both domestically and globally, improves, demand will continue to pick up. Our reduction in our herd, we will eventually get back into break-even situation, I think, in 2010, and then hopefully on to profitability after 2010.